All right, back from Texas, different background. I'm just in my kitchen. And we're gonna be talking about Us, which is the latest social thriller by Jordan Peele and his official follow-up to the 2017 Get Out. And let's talk about it a little bit. So first things first, before we get into some of the specifics that you guys are probably waiting for based on the title, for the people who just kind of want to know if it's worth it for you to watch it, I would say that depends. This is a movie that very much lives in the subtext. This movie is going to leave a lot of kind of like plot holes sticking out, or things that if you're really trying to find a full literal interpretation of everything that happens on screen, you're going to point out and you're going to see a lot of kind of like glaring holes. But with this movie, Jordan Peele is definitely more concerned with the larger meaning that he's trying to weave underneath that story that's kind of being presented to you, because at its face value, it is a flip on the home invasion story, essentially, which is pretty obvious. You've seen the trailers. It is basically this family is being terrorized by kind of like dark versions of themselves. Now, as typical and as was seen in Get Out, Us also has some comedy weaved into it. And unfortunately, in some situations that were definitely supposed to be more sinister, because of the little, like, slightly more comedic tone in earlier moments, people laugh at times that I found were definitely supposed to be more like uncomfortable. And I feel like the same kind of thing happened in Hereditary when I saw it, but then Hereditary has that moment that literally like snaps people into the like, oh shit, this ain't so funny. I don't know if you fully get that moment here, but it definitely weaves in and around this kind of like ridiculous stuff that people might find like unsettling, so they laugh about it, and then stuff being just genuinely funny, and then stuff being genuinely terrifying. Get Out is very much a completed story. It is kind of presented to you. There really isn't much left for you to wonder about, like, why didn't this match up here? Whereas Us is like, I'm just gonna show you a bunch of things. There's a lot of subtext going on here. And if you're gonna get really nitpicky about literal things, you're not going to enjoy the experience. And that is something I can definitely agree with. All right, so now let's get into some of these specifics about this movie. If you don't really wanna know about kind of like the deeper themes, or at least what my thoughts on what I think the deeper themes are, this is probably when you should click off. But to me, this is kind of where I went with the movie. So I remember when going into the movie, I kind of initially thought that because the characters were like dark versions of themselves, this was kind of gonna be some kind of like allegory for like the darker parts of ourselves we don't necessarily like to look at, and kind of like the facades that we put onto the world. And there might be a little bit of that in here for sure. But by the end of the movie, I think it's pretty obvious that this whole thing is supposed to be like it's a representation of social classes, and specifically social classes in America. And that the dark halves of the family and the tethered ones are really just kind of supposed to be an example of homelessness in America and the lower class in America. And, I remember I had a conversation with Art, the guy who runs ATZ show, Let Me Explain. We kind of had a conversation about, people kind of getting themselves, people always work really hard to get out of certain situations, but very rarely do they go back to try to teach the people where they came from how to also get out of those bad situations. Like sometimes they'll go back, they'll give back, but it's really rare that people will go back and try to pull up the same people that they left from. Usually they get out and they are just so happy to be gone that they just keep going. So I think a lot of that is definitely in this movie. So like we'll get into some of the very specific reasons why I think this, but I think at its core, the way it shows the tethered people are kind of like lower, they're underground, they eat scraps. They get like the second best of everything else, essentially living in the shadow of the people who have better lives that don't appreciate it. And then you kind of see the direct other classes as you move up. So you have like Adelaide's family that is very much middle class. They're very comfortable, but there are people ahead of them, above them, that they can always look to, like the Tylers, who are the rich, the wealthy. They have everything. They have the newest cars, they have the bigger boat, they have the beautiful, beautiful summer home. Like they have the best of the best. So you see these different shifts of the social classes, and I think how the tethered ones interact with each of those different social classes kind of alludes to that in itself in another way too. I could be thinking too much into that, but let's get into some specifics. So the Hands Across America thing is like kind of a really good tell for this. Hands Across America was specifically a campaign that was designed to try to fight and end homelessness. People who were participating were supposed to bring money or donations so that they could, provide it to the local charities to fight hunger and homelessness. So that really, in my opinion, completely, like right from the beginning, it tells you what it's going for. That you have this impoverished class of people that are now going to try to fight their way to recognition and to gain some semblance of like higher class and finally fight back, which is, something that is pretty common in a lot of films, but in reality, it doesn't often happen that way. You know, every year that social divide, that poverty divide, and that wealth divide gets larger and larger. The wealthiest get wealthier, the poorest get poorer, and the middle class just kind of like end up in the middle, trying not to rock the boat too much because they don't want to be jostled down to the lower level. Now, this is where it kind of ties back into that, like, people fighting their way out of lower levels. So you've got Adelaide's character, who specifically used to be a tethered person. She is technically red. She literally fought her way out of the poverty area. She worked her way to the surface, and she took what she felt was hers and kind of like banished someone else to that fate that she had before, which is kind of why it kind of gets to this point in the middle where what you think is red, which is actually the original Adelaide, says, you know, like, we could have gone together. You know, I dreamt that we could have gone together. I think that also really parallels like society. Like, why do you have to screw over the people around you to get ahead when there's enough for everyone to go around? I think that that's definitely one of the themes going on there. So at the end of the day, that, in my opinion, that is the central theme. There are a lot of other theories going on, and I'll talk about some of my just general thoughts, but that, in my opinion, is Us Explained. Us is supposed to be a representation of classes and poverty in America. So let's talk about some of the other specific things and some of the other things that I might have taken notice of, and you guys can feel free to like pop some things down below. There are some wild theories about this. I haven't really looked into them, but a couple people mentioned one that I had not really considered, but I'll get to it. But I know the big one, the big reveal, I really called it coming from a while away. Specifically that, you know, the Adelaide that came back was the copy, not the original. And I think that there's kind of like a couple hints that give this away. For one, I think when I specifically caught on was when, you know, the tethered family comes into the house and, you know, Adelaide starts talking, or Red starts talking to the family with the whole like, once upon a time. That was when I kind of caught on. And when the more she's talking, the more I'm like, you know, we never really saw what happened other than her, like, you know, we just hear that she ran away from the situation. And then suddenly she's in this position where she can't talk. And you could say that it's PTSD, but I was like, I wonder if the reason she can't talk is because she's the copy. She's not the original. And then because she was already kind of established as being like a more advanced tethered one, and her experience of being in the light, they say that whoever's, you know, above ground is stronger, like that she just kind of developed and learned to talk again as she goes on. Because it does specifically mention again when she's talking to the friend, where she's like, sometimes I just have trouble talking. There's just like a couple little things like that I find like really give it away. So I was pretty positive that that was what was gonna happen. Then at one point in the movie, I was like, oh, I guess that isn't what happened. But then when that whole conversation started happening where she's all like, we could have both gone together, I was like, maybe it is the copy. And then when she's the only one who can talk, all the other ones just do like kind of different like glottal noises, and she's the only one who can actually talk, but it's very strained. I was just kind of like, I don't know, maybe she's just so advanced she learned how to talk, but it made me think that like she's now the only one who can talk, so she's not practiced with it. And then it gets to the end where it actually shows her like choking her, and I'm like, yo, she probably like crushed her windpipe. That's probably the only way she can talk now, because her windpipe and her throat's been crushed, so that's why she sounds that way. And like swapped Adelaide just learned how to talk better. So I kind of called that one from a mile away. I don't know if you guys did. To me, that wasn't a huge shock. To me, that was just kind of like, I knew it. I called it, but it's whatever. Now, the other theory is that the sun got swapped, and I have not looked into that theory. Like I said, these are just my thoughts, like kind of off the cuff, things that I noticed as I was watching it. I didn't even put the consideration that the sun would have been swapped. I know there's kind of a lot of stuff like with him in the mask and just kind of the way they describe him and the way that he looks at the mom, but there's a lot of different avenues this movie can go down. I might even make like a very proper, like full, like theory or multiple theory videos about this, because it's kind of wild. I thought it was really cool that they were definitely filming The Lost Boys on that pier, because it's the same pier from The Lost Boys, and Lost Boys was released the year after in 1987. So when the mom's like, you know, I think they're filming a movie over there, we should go see if they're looking for extras. I'm pretty sure that's a Lost Boys toss-in, which I thought was really cool, and I kind of looked into it, and I know a lot of other people thought that too, so I think that's a nice little Easter egg from Mr. Peel. And I guess you could even take it one step further to say that it's not just kind of like poverty in America, it's just what America has versus like the rest of the world. You can really just take it kind of globally, but you can take it very small and community-wise as well, and I think that that's why it works on multiple levels. I love that the Jeremiah, like 11:11 was the first one to kind of die. If you kind of noticed that when Jason goes up to that guy on the beach, he's standing like this, And obviously when they're driving to the beach, that Jeremiah 11:11 guy is the one that they see getting pulled into the ambulance. That shows that, you know, theoretically he's the first one in the chain that's starting, and then he's just standing there on the beach like that, waiting for everybody else to kind of come around. That's really cool. Also, specifically, if you want to know, Jeremiah 11:11 is, therefore, thus says the Lord, behold, I am bringing disaster on them, which they will not be able to escape. Though they will cry to me, yet I will not listen to them. So I think that really just kind of lends to the whole overall theme of the movie a little bit too. So it ties in nicely. Obviously it was going to tie in nicely, but just in case you had not looked into it. Now, where a lot of people are definitely going to have like the nitpicks is like, why wouldn't she have just gone back through the hallways and walked back up the escalator? Where did they get all the suits and the scissors? And I think that is where there might be like a fundamental divide with some people. I think a lot of people are just going to accept that like, hey, this is what he was going for. It's really more about the message than some of the more specific details, but other people are going to get caught up on those small details of like, why wouldn't they have just left? And I think that to me comes down to, I personally think it's a little bit like a misunderstanding of what the movie's going for, but it doesn't necessarily make you wrong. Like, I know I can nitpick certain plot holes, and there are plot holes in this. There are a lot of, you know, missing pieces, but I understand what the service of the overall story is, so I can look past them and just kind of be really interested by the little things that he put in that link to that idea of the social story he's trying to tell, whereas other people are 100% just looking for that like well drawn out told story. And I do think in some situations he does a little bit too much telling versus showing. Some of those like longer monologues from like Red/Real Adelaide, you know, in the classroom, it's like it explains so much, but then at the same time, nothing at all. I think there might have been a better way to weave some of that stuff in. I think getting really caught up on some of those smaller plot holes is going to prevent you from enjoying the movie for what it is. But again, that wouldn't necessarily make you wrong. That's why I personally think that Get Out was a much cleaner viewing experience, but I think Us leaves a lot to talk about and a lot to consider. And like, I'm just sitting here thinking of some of the smaller things that I noticed at the end when she tells Jason that like everything's okay now, but you're like, but you know, all of these Hands Across America people just killed like the entire world, and they're just chain linked together across the entire world. What does that mean? Like, what's happening at this point? It really kind of shows that selfishness of like, cause I'm okay and we're okay, nothing else matters. And, you know, to an extent, yeah, you got to look out for number one, but it just kind of shows the, you know, I got out of this bad situation. I now cannot care about that anymore. I just have to worry about myself. So she's so terrified the entire movie because she literally crawled herself out of that situation, crawled her way out of poverty. She is so terrified to go back that she can't even entertain the thought of how to fix that problem and integrate it together with actual society. So I think that that is a very big direct parallel to things that you see a lot in the real world. Some people are just so scared to go back that they don't even want to try to help the people that were around them growing up because they're just so afraid. So yeah, I do still think that that concept of us, even if it's the people that they're not directly us, they're not literally us, the people that we see that are lower than us, that we're kind of afraid of, that we don't want to accept, that can even go beyond poverty, but just in general, not understanding other people. At the end of the day, we're all human. They are us. We are all the same. And I think that the world would be better if we just took more time to be more understanding. So I think that is one of the underlying themes. I think originally I thought it was going to be a lot more literal in the sense that like these are the darker versions of ourselves. And while, like I said, there's a little bit of that, it is really just more the, you know, these people that we see as lower than us, these people that we see as different than us, at the end of the day, they are us. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Us. I think that this movie kind of has a hard truth to think about. I think all of us are a little bit more cruel and a little bit more selfish than we care to admit. I know I am in a lot of situations, but I think it's a good movie to watch and just kind of like think about the larger implications. So if you guys have seen Us, let me know what you guys are thinking in the comments section down below. What are some of your favorite theories from the movie? Some of the crazy things you're thinking about? I am sure that I am already missing some of the stuff that I thought of in the past, 12 hours since it's been finished. But yeah, really interesting movie, definitely worth the watch if you're looking for something different. I think Jordan Peele is one of the few people really kind of taking chances and doing different things with his stories. So give it a go, let me know what you think, and have a fantastic day.